What would you do if you heard a baby crying in an empty hospital room at 3 a.m.? Because I did. And what I discovered about that room still keeps me awake at night. Every ICU nurse knows the rhythm of the night shift, the steady beeping of monitors, the soft whoosh of ventilators, the quiet padding of sneakers on linoleum floors. But some hospitals have their own sounds. Sounds that don't belong in any medical textbook. I'm Emma, and I'd been working nights in intensive care for 8 years. I thought I'd seen everything. Families saying goodbye, miraculous recoveries, and heartbreaking losses. But nothing prepared me for what happened during those early morning hours when the hospital felt more like a tomb than a place of healing. It started on a Tuesday night in October. The ICU was unusually quiet. Just 5 patients, all stable, all sleeping peacefully. I was catching up on charts at the nurses' station when I heard it for the first time. A baby's cry. Soft, muffled, but unmistakably real. I froze, pen halfway through writing a medication note. My heart started racing because I knew, absolutely knew, there were no babies on our floor. Not a single infant. I glanced around, wondering if the sound was coming from the maternity ward upstairs, but it felt too close, too immediate. Had you ever heard something that made your skin crawl? Something that just felt wrong? I followed the sound down the dimly lit hallway, my footsteps echoing off the walls. The crying grew louder as I approached room 318, a room that had been empty for 3 days. The door was slightly ajar, and through the gap I could see the unmade bed, the silent machines pushed against the wall. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The crying stopped immediately, as if someone had flipped a switch. The silence that followed was so complete, it felt heavy, pressing against my eardrums. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, waiting, listening. Nothing. But that wasn't the last time I heard it. Over the next few weeks it became a regular occurrence, always between 2 and 4 a.m., always from room 318. I started asking the other nurses if they'd noticed anything strange. That's when Lisa, one of the day shift supervisors, pulled me aside in the break room. Her face went pale when I mentioned the crying. "Emma," she whispered, glancing around to make sure we were alone. "You're not the first person to hear that." She told me about Marcus, a night nurse who'd transferred to another unit after claiming he heard babies crying for weeks. About Rebecca from housekeeping, who refused to clean room 318 alone anymore. About Dr. Peterson, who mentioned hearing phantom sounds during his late rounds. What would you do in this situation? Would you investigate or would you try to forget about it? But Lisa saved the worst part for last. 6 months ago, she said room 318 had been occupied by a young mother named Jessica Williams. She'd been in a car accident at 7 months pregnant. The medical team managed to deliver her baby, a little girl they called Hope, but both mother and daughter were fighting for their lives. Jessica died first, on a rainy Thursday morning. Hope held on for another week, tiny and struggling in the NICU upstairs. When she finally passed, the staff was devastated. It was one of those cases that stays with you, that makes you question everything. The crying started about a month after Hope died. Lisa said quietly, "Room 318 was the last place Jessica was alive. Some of us think maybe she's looking for her baby." I didn't want to believe it. I'm a nurse. I deal in facts, in science, in things I can see and measure, but curiosity got the better of me. One night in November, I decided to spend my break in room 318. I brought a chair, a cup of coffee, and my phone to record any sounds. I felt ridiculous, like some amateur ghost hunter, but I needed to know the truth. At 2:47 a.m., it started again, but this time, it was different. The crying wasn't just the sound of a baby. It was the sound of a mother's grief, deep and heartbroken and desperate. And through my phone speaker, I could hear something else. A woman's voice, barely a whisper. "Where is she? Where's my hope?" My hands shook as I played back the recording. The crying was there, clear as day, but the voice, The voice was something else entirely. I ran to the nurse's station and pulled Jessica Williams' file. There, staring back at me from her ID photo, was a young woman with kind eyes and a bright smile. The same voice I'd just heard calling for her daughter. I never worked another shift without thinking about room 318. Some nights I'd hear the crying and I'd whisper, "She's safe now, Jessica. Hope is safe." And sometimes, I swear, sometimes, the crying would fade into what sounded almost like relief. The hospital administration moved me to the cardiac wing after I filed my incident reports. They said it was for better work-life balance. But I knew the truth. They didn't want to deal with a nurse who heard dead patients calling for their children. Room 318 is still part of the ICU. Other nurses have reported the crying, but most are too afraid to speak up. They don't want to end up like me. Transferred, questioned, looked at like they're losing their mind. But I know what I heard. And sometimes, on quiet nights when I'm driving past the hospital, I wonder if Jessica Williams is still there, still searching, still calling out for the daughter she never got to hold. Have you ever experienced something in a hospital that you couldn't explain, something that made you question what's really possible in places where so much life and death happens? Share your stories in the comments below. They say nurses develop a sixth sense about death. But nothing prepared me for the moment I felt him touch my shoulder 3 minutes after he'd already gone. Memorial General gets this strange quietness after midnight. Not peaceful, more like the whole building is holding its breath. I'm Lisa, been working night shifts here for 6 years, and I thought I'd seen everything. That Tuesday night felt different from the moment I clocked in. The air seemed thicker somehow, like a storm was coming, but never arrived. My sneakers squeaked against the polished floors as I made my final rounds. A room after room of sleeping patients, their steady breathing mixing with the soft hum of machines. Just one more stop before I could finally head home to my tiny apartment and collapse. Room 318. Mr. Peterson had been with us for almost a week, a sweet old man who reminded me of my grandfather. His daughter visited every day, bringing him cookies he couldn't eat, and reading him stories from the newspaper. Tonight she'd gone home around 8, kissing his forehead and whispering, "See you tomorrow, Dad." I pushed open his door, expecting to find him sleeping like always. The heart monitor showed its usual steady rhythm. His breathing seemed normal, but something in the room felt heavy, like the air itself had weight. I checked his IV, adjusted his blanket, all the routine stuff. That's when it happened. This bone-deep cold started at the base of my neck and spread down my spine. Not like air conditioning or a draft. This was different, personal, intentional. Have you ever felt completely alone but somehow knew someone was watching you? The temperature in that room dropped at least 10 degrees in seconds. I could see my breath forming little clouds. As I exhaled, my hands started shaking, and not from the cold. Something was there with me, something that shouldn't have been. Then I felt it. Fingers, gentle but unmistakably real, pressing against my right shoulder blade. The touch was so cold it burned, like grabbing ice with bare hands. I spun around so fast I nearly knocked over the bedside table. Nothing. Just Mr. Peterson lying peacefully, and me standing there like an idiot, heart hammering against my ribs. But that spot on my shoulder, it stayed frozen, even when I left the room. Even when I drove home with the heater cranked up, that one spot felt like winter had settled into my bones and decided to stay. The next morning, I walked into work expecting everything to be normal. Maybe I'd tell Amy about my weird night, laugh it off over coffee. Instead, I found Dr. Martinez talking quietly with Mr. Peterson's daughter in the hallway. Her eyes were red and swollen. He passed very peacefully around 2:47 a.m. Dr. Martinez was saying, "The night nurse said he went in his sleep. No pain, no struggle." 2:47 a.m. I checked my watch from memory. That was exactly when I'd felt those impossible fingers on my shoulder. What would you do if you realized the dead don't always leave quietly? 3 weeks have passed since that night. The cold spot on my shoulder finally faded, but I can't shake what happened. I've worked hundreds of night shifts since then. Been in rooms where patients have passed, but nothing like that has ever happened again. Maybe Mr. Peterson was saying goodbye. Maybe he needed someone to know he wasn't alone when he crossed over. Or maybe some part of him wasn't ready to let go just yet. His daughter sent a card thanking the night staff for taking such good care of him. She said he always felt safe here, that he told her the nurses were like angels watching over him. I keep that card in my locker. Sometimes during particularly quiet nights, I wonder if we're not the only ones doing the watching. The hospital still gets that strange stillness. After midnight, rooms still fill with that heavy feeling sometimes. But now I know, when someone reaches out to touch you from the other side, they leave more than just a cold spot. They leave proof that love doesn't end with a heartbeat, and some connections are stronger than the space between life and whatever comes next. Have you ever felt someone who wasn't there? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. Hey friends, thanks for tuning in. A huge shout out to our amazing subscribers. You are the reason these chilling tales keep coming to life. If you are enjoying the spine-tingling stories, consider hitting that subscribe button. It only takes a second, but it means the world to us. While you are at it, don't forget to like and share to keep the chills spreading. We appreciate you more than you know. See you in the next one, if you dare. A hospital can be a quiet place. After the rush of the day, I had just finished my shift, exhausted from running around and trying to keep everything in order. It was one of those nights when everything felt heavier than usual. The kind of shift where your body feels like it's moving on autopilot. I had just finished checking on all my patients and was sitting in the break room trying to relax for a moment before heading home. The night was still. There was no sound, except for the occasional beeping of machines down the hallway. It was almost eerie how peaceful it was. For that time of night, I got up from the chair ready to finish the last of my rounds. Before clocking out, I had to check on room 305. As I walked through the hallway, I passed empty rooms and dimmed lights. I reached the door of room 305, where an elderly man had been resting quietly for the past few days. He had been a bit unresponsive lately, but nothing had seemed alarming. Just the slow process of aging. I opened the door quietly, not wanting to disturb him, but as soon as I stepped inside, something felt off. It wasn't the room itself. The machines were still humming quietly. The air felt still, but not unpleasant. What caught me off guard was this sudden sensation, this odd feeling, almost like someone was standing too close behind me. I brushed it off as fatigue, thinking maybe I was just too tired after the long night. But then I felt it, a coldness, an icy sensation like a hand cold as ice, gently resting on my shoulder. My breath caught in my throat. I froze for a second, thinking I was imagining it. But the coldness stayed. It wasn't a draft. It wasn't something explainable. It felt like a real hand, a solid, unyielding pressure that made the hairs on my neck stand up. I turned quickly, but the room was empty. No one was there. I looked around again. The man on the bed was still there, lying in his usual position. Peaceful, though he seemed a little more still than before. But there was no one else in the room. I stood there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. I could still feel the cold spot on my shoulder, almost like it had sunk into my skin. I raised my hand to touch the spot, but it felt wrong. It felt colder than the rest of my body, like something wasn't quite right. I didn't know what to make of it. It was too real to ignore, yet there was no explanation. The night continued, and I finished my rounds. But I couldn't shake the sensation. It lingered with me. That icy touch that wouldn't leave the spot on my shoulder stayed cold for hours, well into my drive home. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The next morning, as I came in for my shift, I overheard one of the doctors speaking to the family. I wasn't supposed to be eavesdropping, but I overheard the words that made my stomach twist. The patient in room 305, the one I just checked on, had passed away peacefully that night, just after my shift had ended. I didn't know what to think. The cold touch, the unexplainable sensation, it all started to make sense, but it didn't make me feel any better. Some part of me wanted to believe it was just fatigue or stress from a long night, but deep down, I knew it was something else. The sensation didn't go away. It stayed with me for days. It was as if whatever that presence was had left a trace, something that couldn't be explained by the physical world. It lingered like a reminder that some things go beyond what we can see and touch. The body might not feel the presence of the deceased, but certain sensations, some of them seem to transcend the physical. They stay even after the pulse has stopped. And sometimes they don't just disappear. They linger quietly. When I found out she had been dead for 3 hours, I couldn't breathe, because I had just seen her eyes move. Working night shifts in the ICU changes you. You see people at their most vulnerable, fighting battles you can't always understand. Most patients blur together after a while. Faces that come and go, stories that end quietly. But some patients, they stick with you forever. Her name was Linda Carter, mid-70s, admitted with complications nobody could quite explain. She'd been with us for almost a month, and while other nurses saw just another elderly woman declining, I felt something different every time I stepped into her room. It started with her eyes. Linda never slept. Not once during my shifts. She'd lie perfectly still, staring straight up at the white ceiling tiles with this laser focus that made my skin crawl. Her gaze was so intense, so deliberate, like she was watching the most important movie of her life, playing above her head. I'd lean over her bed during my rounds, checking her IV, adjusting her blankets, and whisper, "How are you feeling tonight, Linda?" Nothing, not even a blink. But then I'd feel it, this shift in the air, this awareness that made me look up. Those pale blue eyes would slide toward me, crystal clear and completely alert. For someone who couldn't speak, couldn't respond to commands, her eyes held more life than anyone else in that wing. It was like she was trying to tell me something urgent, something I desperately needed to understand. Have you ever had someone look at you like they know a secret you don't? That's how Linda looked at me every single night. The feeling got worse as weeks passed. I'd catch myself staring at the ceiling in her room, trying to see whatever had captured her attention so completely. Just standard hospital fixtures, fluorescent lights, sprinkler heads, air vents. Nothing special. Nothing that should hold someone's gaze for hours without moving. But Linda's eyes never wavered. Hour after hour she'd stare up with this unwavering concentration that made my chest tight with anxiety. Sometimes I'd wave my hand above her face, testing if she'd track the movement. She wouldn't. Her focus stayed locked on that same spot, directly above her bed. Other nurses started avoiding her room. "She gives me the creeps," my colleague Maria whispered during shift change. "It's like she's watching something we can't see." That's exactly what I was afraid of. The night everything changed. Started like any other. I was making my 2 a.m. rounds when I noticed something different in Linda's room. The air felt heavier, colder. The usual hum of machines seemed muffled, like the room was holding its breath. Linda was in her typical position, flat on her back, eyes fixed on the ceiling, but something about her stillness felt more final. I checked her pulse. Steady. Breathing was normal. All her monitors showed stable vitals. I was updating her chart when I felt it. That familiar sensation of being watched. I looked up to find Linda's eyes had shifted to me. But this time was different. This time there was urgency in her gaze. Almost panic. Her lips parted slightly, like she was trying to speak. I leaned closer, my heart pounding. "What is it, Linda? What are you trying to tell me? For the first time in a month, she blinked. Once, deliberately. Then her eyes moved back to the ceiling. That's when I saw it. A shadow. Not from any of the equipment. Not from the hallway lights. This shadow was moving across the ceiling tiles directly above Linda's bed, shifting and changing shape like something was walking around up there. I blinked hard. Convinced I was seeing things, the shadow was gone. But Linda's eyes were tracking something, following an invisible path from one side of the ceiling to the other, back and forth, like she was watching someone pace. My hands started shaking as I grabbed my phone to call the charge nurse. But when I looked up again, Linda had gone completely still, not breathing still. Her eyes were wide open, fixed on a spot directly above the foot of her bed. I ran for help, but we were too late. The doctor confirmed Linda had passed sometime around 2:15 a.m., right when I had seen that shadow moving across her ceiling. What haunts me most is what the day shift nurse told me the next morning. She said Linda's room had been acting up for weeks. The temperature would drop randomly. Equipment would malfunction for no reason. And several nurses reported feeling like someone was standing behind them when they worked in there. But here's the thing that still keeps me awake. They moved another patient into Linda's bed 3 days later, and within hours she was doing the exact same thing, staring at the ceiling with that same intense, unwavering focus, like she was watching something none of us could see. I transferred to day shift after that. I tell myself it was for better work-life balance. But honestly, I couldn't handle walking past Linda's room anymore. Because sometimes, late at night, when I drive past the hospital, I look up at those third-floor windows and wonder, what would you do if you could see what they're watching? Leave me a comment below. Thank you all for being a part of these journeys with me. Your continued support truly means the world, and I absolutely enjoy reading your comments, especially when you share your own experiences and reactions. If these tales had you holding your breath or sent a chill down your spine, don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe for more eerie and unsettling stories. Have you ever gone through something similar, or do you have your own mysterious encounter to share? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to read it. Every story you share helps deepen the connection in our growing community of horror lovers. There's more to come, so stay close for more chilling tales. And remember, the most terrifying stories are often the ones that feel a little too real. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.